This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast, show 237, the May 12th, 2017 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you, broadcasting live through the magic of Spreaker from the Brooklyn Bunker. Just a couple weeks ago, I hosted a show while rolling down the highway in the Borman Mobile. Today, do we have a guest coming to us from the Kinchin Mobile?
Temporarily. It was career day at my son Austin's school today. So when I went to take him, I didn't know where they were, and so it kind of threw me off. So I'm 8 minutes behind. I'm a little bit surprised they didn't invite me to come talk about career day.
Oh, that would have been some speech. I
know. My favorite part of Mike Maloney's story is when he used to have to go and talk about what he did for a living, and his son's teachers always thought he was kind of full of it.
They didn't believe him. His son, they called him in, parent-teacher conference. Your son seems like a great kid, but we're a little concerned that he sometimes doesn't tell the truth. Well, whatever do you mean? How could my kid not tell the truth? Well, he says his daddy bets the horses at Keeneland for a living, and then he says to the teacher, yes, in fact, that is what I do. Not only did the Maloney kid get the stink eye from the teacher, so did Mike Maloney himself. This and other stories in Mike Maloney's upcoming memoir hybrid instructional we'll be talking about in the coming weeks and months on the DRF Players Podcast. That other voice you hear, of course, that is the people's champ himself, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, everything else good? Career day. I'm glad to see at the age of 5, you've already decided to try to get some return on your investment in Austin. You're getting ready to put him to work?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, he's gonna do something. I gotta stop working at some point. So, actually, we were singing on the way. It's so funny you mentioned this. We were singing on the way to school, and I thought, well, what if he could be like a superstar and I don't got to ever work again? That'd be phenomenal.
Well, you've got the breeding. You look at it's not always just about the direct lineage, as we know from looking at pedigrees with horses. If you want to look at musical pedigrees, he's got it not necessarily through you, but through your bro. So, who of course is a world famous DJ, gets flown around and paid sums of money to DJ for millennials in places like Ibiza. So you know what it
reminds me of. It reminds me of that horse. I think the horse's name is Aldrin, who is a half to tap it. But he's been running in claiming races, I think, at this point now. And so it's kind of the same thing. I think my brother's Tap It and I'm Aldrin when it comes to music. So
I don't know. Somebody's going to stand Aldrin somewhere. You got to get that. You got to get that Tap It blood wherever you can. All right. On today's show, we are going to be looking back and looking forward. It's actually a really cool card at Belmont on Saturday. Was just looking it over. 4 stakes races. We'll get to our quick thoughts on those. I've admitted this in the past, and I have to admit it today. By the time we get to the Belmont races, the podcast I love the podcast. It's one of the favorite parts of my job, but it's not the part of my job that's actually the reason I have a job. So there are days like today when I've gotten a chance to look at the races we talk about here about a quarter as much as I would like, doing the work that actually keeps me employed somewhat gainfully at Daily Racing Form. So JK, you're going to have to do a lot more of the heavy lifting when it comes time to do the actual handicapping. But there's a lot I want to do before we get to that. We had more really good questions from last week that we didn't get a chance to get to in that jam-packed Preakness edition of the show. And we've got a few more of those and just some more general talk about the Preakness. I want to start off today's show with a game of buy or sell that I saw coming out. And this was via Twitter, so I don't even know where this price was offered. But somewhere in Las Vegas, somebody was offering 4-1 on Classic Empire to win the Preakness. Buy, sell, hold.
Buy. I was actually, before we got on the air, you were typing the description and you shushed me to focus, and I was gonna ask you.
Did I shush you? I apologize for that. I'm not a shushing type.
No, you didn't shush me. You just said you said just let me focus real quick. Okay. But I was interested in the idea of if we could get 4-1 on Classic Empire here, what can we get in the UK? on Always Dreaming, and can we do some kind of a Dutch work situation? Because I would absolutely buy at 4-1.
Interesting idea for arbitrage. It's been funny. I've seen this lately. Horse racing Twitter has some amazing elements. It has some frustrating elements. I've noticed a little bit of a trend that's been popping up in my feed, and this weird kind of red boarding. People being abusive about anyone who picked Paradise Woods in the Oaks after the fact. I mean, really bad etiquette to say this stuff after the fact. If you want to say it before the fact, go with God. And it seems like the new one is, I caught a little bit of heat for my suggestions on the show last week that, I kind of hemmed and hawed. I didn't actually just come out and do what I should have done, which is said that maybe Classic Empire, or not even take the maybe out and say that Classic Empire was best, or Classic Empire is the horse I definitely want. I probably needed to be a little more definitive about it in the first place out of the Kentucky Derby, but it seems like that opinion has garnered some abuse in some quarters. Where are you right now? I think you sort of showed your hand, but where are you in terms of how you're imagining you're going to bet the Preakness a week and a day out?
Well, I think one of the things I've learned over the years is the idea of a horse running well on the first Saturday in May and beating a field of 19, and then coming back in 2 weeks and facing lesser horses that couldn't qualify for the Derby in most situations. Obviously, Bernardini might disagree with me about that. And then also horses that were running in that same race that couldn't get the job done. They have an unbelievable advantage. They're fit. They're ready to go. They're probably fitter than they were before. So Always Dreaming's got a pretty big advantage. But at the same time, I do see a world in which Classic Empire can turn the tables based on kind of what he's had to go through leading up to the race and what he went through during the race.
The fact is that the record of the horses coming back out, it's definitely worth something. The wheelback is a positive, not a negative for this race, not necessarily for going forward in their lives. But it's pretty rare that you see a horse who ran well in the Derby and then comes back in the Preakness no-show. There are examples, and it does seem like some of the examples are from when the track is muddy or sloppy. Does that give you any concern about either of these horses coming back in 2 weeks?
Yeah, you always have to wonder, when you look, if you're handicapping Aqueduct on a Wednesday and you look down and you see that a horse ran a big figure in the slop or had a win in the slop, you need to ask yourself, did it happen there? And make sure that the price is you're getting a price that to figure out if he's going to like it here on a fast track. So absolutely.
And that might, it's one of those things where there's trends and counter trends, and you have to figure out which thing's going to matter on the day of the race itself. Looking in England right now, here's an interesting one. I may have to send an email to a friend in the middle of the show here because I'm seeing some 6-1 about Classic Empire in the UK right now. If any UK Irish listeners can get a chunk of that, I would highly recommend it. Looking like evens on Always Dreaming. I imagine he'll be a little shorter than that, but it certainly doesn't seem to create the type of arbitrage opportunity you were looking for, does it?
Well, no, I think if he's going to be 6-1 there, I think if you can grab 6-1 and even, you could probably get a nice Dutch opportunity there.
You could make the math work. I'm just saying, it evens this far out it just doesn't really get the blood boiling on Always Dreaming. I was thinking there was a world in which you might see some 6-5, 7-4, something. But
he's going to be 4-5 on the day, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, you're probably right. I guess if it becomes then a question of if it's non-run or no bet, because with these advanced prices you see, sometimes they are and sometimes they're not. And what that means is, you could take the evens he's declared from the race tomorrow. The difference between here's your money back and sorry you're out of luck. In a sorry you're out of luck situation, I think I'd rather just wait for the difference between evens and 4-5. In a non-run or no bet, it's a little bit of a different story. You get a chance to. The other advantage of waiting and taking a shorter price on the day is you just have an opportunity to read the vibes a little bit more, hear how he's looking when he's out for his little morning gallops, etc. So it's a tough call. Generally speaking, with the ante-post, it's more appealing, obviously, even though the overlay it's a huge difference percentage-wise, evens to 4-5. It doesn't get me as enticed to act as when you're seeing a massive overlay at a bigger price like the Classic Empire. What price realistically do you think he's going to be on the day?
I think it'll be 5-2.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably about right. I mean, I could even see 2-1. Again, like kind of depending on what the vibes are around each horse. In terms of the new horses showing up, is there anybody from this far out? And we'll be going through this whole field at length on a show next week. But from this far out, is there anybody who's appealing to you? You've already mentioned a little bit of cynicism about looking at Lee, who I guess is coming back from the Derby. But how about the cloud computings of the world? Any interest from this far out?
Yeah, that's the only one for me, cloud computing. If I can get him to hit the board, I think I might put you guys away in the Derby draft contest. So,
you're looking pretty good right now, I have to say.
If I can get him to hit you got to think that Always Dreaming is going to at least hit the board, right? I mean, crazier things have happened, but
it would be a surprise. I mean, you think back to a horse like Orb; it's not written in stone that it has to happen, but
the only difference about Orb for me, and was that he got and Always Dreaming did get a nice setup, I think, with the track the way it was, but Orb got a massive setup.
Yeah, it's speed versus not speed, right?
Exactly. Orb is an off the pace type who's dependent on the race shape to favor them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Preakness weekend, I will be out at Santa Anita. I can't wait. I'm already putting together some fun plans. Going to go try to see a Dodger game on Thursday night with our friends Louise and Ryan. Going to try to get them out to Front Runner for a little lunch on Friday. There's going to be an array of tournament players on hand. If folks want to play in that tournament, there is a last chance qualifier on Sunday on DRF tournaments. Hopefully that's going to fill. Go ahead and buy your entries now. Maybe we can create some momentum and make sure that tournament goes off as scheduled on Sunday. Are you going to be looking to qualify? Are you definitely coming to Santa Anita? I never know with your world travel plans, JK, but I'm hoping you get the jet gassed up and are going to be landing at Bob Hope Airport on Friday night.
I am. I would say I'm even money to show up.
Oh wow, that's which is actually a bit of what we used to call a lobster. A bet you want to see the horse open at 1-9, so it opens at evens, and it's actually kind of soft on the board, like that the Pletcher horse, the 10, the gray Mission Impossible, in the I guess it was the fourth race yesterday at Belmont. I was singled in picks and saw the horse open up at 6-1. The horse is supposed to open up at 8-5, and I basically knew I was beat right then. Is this the same thing? Is there a real chance you're gonna bail on this weekend?
No, I'm gonna come. And I am gonna try to qualify.
Excellent. So you'll be getting involved on DRF tournaments. Been a lot more activity on the site lately. Folks are pleased with a lot of the new changes on DRF tournaments, and they're also pleased with this World Championship of Handicapping that was just announced a couple of weeks ago. The biggest wrinkle there being the $5,000 buy-in, no takeout finals with $1 million on the line. The first 5 players won their way in last weekend. We've got round 1 contests and feeders every day. I've noticed your name has been almost curiously absent from any of the top of the leaderboards, Jonathan. Have you hit a tough run of luck, or are you just focusing your contest action elsewhere and haven't gotten involved yet in the WCH?
Yeah, no, I haven't dove in yet. I know we have plenty of time, and to be honest with you, this might sound bad, but the ratios, the way the ratios are, I don't feel that like panic of I gotta play when I have that one special day. A good day can get you qualified for this event with 1-7 and 1-10. So, I'm not feeling all panicked where it's like, oh, I got to get a 1-65. Oh, I got to play every weekend because if I don't play, I'm going to miss that one day where I was going to have 1-65. So I'm 1-7, 1-10. If you have a day that's respectable, you can make some noise in a situation like that. So the sense of urgency, the panic hasn't really set in for me yet. But I'll get rolling here pretty soon. I've just been focused on trying to get qualified for the live events that I want to play in that are closer. I'm always usually a calendar guy, right? It's like I focus on, like right now, my focus is on getting qualified for Santa Anita and Monmouth because I'm planning on playing in both of those. So my time and attention, I want to focus on that. I've got 6 months to still get qualified for the WHC, and so that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, it's going to be. I'm pretty pleased. Just the amount of people participating. I think it's got a really good shot to fill. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. The sense of urgency maybe isn't there. But if you're in terms of looking for your best value propositions out there, I think it should definitely be on many of the listeners' radars, as I know it already is. We had a couple of listeners getting their seats last weekend. I actually got the entire story about Elliot Honecker's qualification. We're going to be writing about Elliot today in the pages of Daily Racing Form for Sunday's paper and also online. Did you know the added wrinkle that one of the reasons he used Limousine Liberal was because of you, Jonathan?
Yeah, he texted me. That's why he really owes me something big. He also, he beat me with Arklow, and then he qualified, and then he beat me with Keen Ice. I mean, this is becoming a real one-sided friendship. The only thing that's ever happened that he's done for me, and he didn't even do it on purpose. We played in a head-to-head one time together, and I had spent some time that week making not a tutorial video, but like a kind of, I was trying to prove to you they needed to improve something on the website, and they did it. Which was to get rid of the save button. And I was making a video, and I just was picking random horses in this head-to-head as my example in the video. And I never changed it before I played Elliot. And I looked at it after the first race ran. I had a 20-1 shot that I did not pick that ran second. He was just some random horse that I had clicked in for this kind of example video that I was making. And so I texted Elliot and sent him my real picks. And I beat him, and so I beat him with both. So that's the only thing he's ever done for me, and he didn't even do it on purpose.
It's pretty funny. He is a good dude. I had a lot of fun talking to him this week. One of the partners in Donegal Racing, Keen Ice, of course, Arklow. Some great successes that they've had and he's had, and he's a good dude, regular listener, and a real dyed-in-the-wool DRF guy. Great to see him have success, and excited about following. He's committed to getting a couple other WCH entries if he can. Remember, it's limited to 200, up to 3 per person. So check out tournaments.drf.com and see what is available to play as soon as today. A few questions came in from last week, so let's deal with those first. This is an interesting one. It's harkening back to the Derby. We haven't talked about this at all, but Matt wanted to know, what did we make of the discrepancies between the various figure makers from Always Dreaming's figure in Florida? He points out that it was the fastest Florida Derby in nearly 4 decades. The figures didn't all reflect it as a superior figure to say the Wood figure. What do you make of the discrepancies, and do you think that maybe some of the figure makers underestimated the Florida Derby?
Well, so I don't have the numbers that he's talking about in front of me, but I think that there's a one of the 5 most important books ever written in our sport. This entire thing is covered in it, which would be Buyer on Speed. I'm assuming that although it was the fastest Florida Derby run in 4 decades or whatever it was, they're talking about the final time.
Correct.
Well, that's what that book is about, and that's what speed figures are. Is that it's not always the final time. It's how the track plays, and that's what makes the difference. And obviously the track was playing fast that day. The figure makers thought that was the case and gave the figure accordingly.
But do you believe, based on his seeming superiority in the race, that maybe that figure was low, or does this bring us back to the idea that I certainly put forth on the last show, that maybe even as good as Always Dreaming was, he did overperform a little bit based on where he was positioned in the racetrack throughout the race?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he wasn't that fast early in the Florida Derby. The pace wasn't blistering. So I don't have a problem with the figure not being as high as it was. And obviously he ran well, and it wasn't an embarrassing figure. So I think pace also, especially with time form, pace is going to to influence that final figure.
It is interesting, though, the year after year now, we've seen certain races, and I was among those. I'm not the type to get my knickers in a twist over the graded stakes committee and what they do. But even for me, it was a little surprising to see the bluegrass and the wood go from grade 1 to grade 2. And then the horses everybody shows up in Kentucky, and once again, another year where at the wire, the bluegrass and the wood horses are nowhere, and you see Florida and Arkansas and a little Santa Anita making up the superfecta. Do you consider this idea? I mean, first of all, do you care at all about the grading of these races? But then the more important and serious question is, are we at a point now where we have to actually really start questioning this New York and Kentucky form coming into the Kentucky Derby?
No, I don't think you need to worry about it. I mean, to me, it was a chicken.
It's a coincidence.
Chicken and egg. Yeah, it's chicken and egg, right? I mean, somewhere I heard that Always Dreaming was going to run in the Florida Derby because it was a grade 1. So I mean, what if they wanted to run somewhere else? I mean, here's
that's
the
interesting,
thing, right? And here's the thing: you've seen about 3 or 4 pieces written about how the owners are good old Brooklyn guys, and and Brooklyn went to Aqueduct, went to Belmont, Brooklyn. You're going to tell me that deep down inside they didn't really want to run that horse in the wood, and they probably would have or might have. At least there'd be a much better argument if it was a grade 1, and maybe they decided, let's just stick down here in Florida. He ran well here. It's a grade 1. The wood's a grade 2. Let's just get this grade 1. I mean, so I think that he could have easily run in the wood and won the race in the wood and then came down and won the race in the Derby. So it doesn't really mean anything to me.
But it is interesting, though, to think in terms of future years of handicapping that maybe it is an advantage, that maybe it becomes a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy isn't quite the right word, but listeners probably know where I'm going with that. That idea that those gradings hurt those races and will make them less productive. I mean, are you at a point? I mean, I certainly didn't downgrade Irish War Cry. I had in our Derby draft, that was my pick: Always Dreaming or Irish War Cry. I went with, for reasons I explained back then, which didn't work out too well, went with Irish War Cry over him. Maybe, though, next year, if I'm in the same position, you lean for the horse that comes out of the grade 1?
No, I think that's probably a dangerous, rule of thumb to start. I get the argument, I guess, when you're trying to split hairs, but I treat each race as an individual situation because there's so many factors that go into it. I mean, what if there's some New York guys that could care less about the grade and they just want to win the wood? So they bring the number 1 rated horse in the world to the wood to run in a grade 2 because they want to win in Belmont, New York. And then you're going to, you don't want to get to a point where you fade that horse because he ran in the grade 2.
You could see an owner like Mike Repoli doing something like that. He's talked about how much winning the wood meant to him. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about a little bit of wagering strategy. Nick had a question about trifecta wagering specifically. He liked Good Samaritan and Arklow in the American turf, somehow managed to miss the try. JK, what are your general thoughts on betting structure in the trifecta?
Well, I think the biggest thing in the try is you need to find a horse and key that horse in all 3 spots. And then you need to use it's kind of like 3 levels. And this is something that I've gotten from Nick Tamero, who masterfully hit like 7 trifectas on Breeders' Cup Day in the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge when he got 4th. And in a couple of them, his biggest ones, he didn't even have strong opinions about the horses that won. It was just random. Like he hit the Take Charge Brandy trifecta because he keyed Top Decile and someone else in 2nd and 3rd. And then he hit the Caraconte trifecta because he keyed the filly that was from the same barn as Goldakova. I think his name was Anidin. The Colt,
Colt, yeah, Anidin. It was his. It's her brother, Goldakova's brother.
Right. So the answer to that question, I think, is that you got to find your key situation. Let's just go back to the Derby as an example. If your key is Always Dreaming, then you need to key Always Dreaming with your logicals, the ones that you also like. You're kind of strong logicals, so you key him with McCracken and Taprit. These are mine. I'm just saying out loud. Taprit, McCracken, Irish War Cry, and then you want to key him with those horses. Then you want to do it with kind of your looser logicals, where you kind of throw in horses that you might not like so much, but you could see how they could run well. Thunder Snow and maybe a looking at Lee and so on and so forth. And then you kind of do it with like almost all, but not all, where you'll use horses like Battle of Midway. I think that's probably the best way to play. And obviously in a smaller field, a 10-horse field on a Saturday, it's a little bit easier to construct that type of ticket than it is on Derby Day. But I think you want to find a horse that you like, key him in every spot, and then if you're really, 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 really right, you want to have the try multiple times, $10, $5, $6, $12, whatever your bankroll allows. I am not interested in ever catching a 50-cent try that like hits my opinion. If I get a 50-cent try, it's because like chaos happened and I'm just trying to get out, and I'm just trying to get out of the bet and in that situation. So I think you want to find a key and go and build around that in that way.
The other thing I'll add about the trifecta, and I think people don't really fully grasp this always, is if you were going to play in that pool, it's a difficult pool. Level of difficulty goes way up from exacta to try. I want there to be a reason I'm playing the try. And the two logical reasons for me, particularly weak favorite, who I think is going to be out entirely and juice the payoff of all three of those spots, or a horse who I specifically think has a good chance to run third or second and third, who I don't necessarily like to win, usually a long shot, usually a closer, who I just don't know that there's going to be enough time to get up. And constructing that bet from the bottom up in many instances as another way to take advantage of what's special about that bet. Because a lot of times I think people are playing tries when they might as well just be playing exactas. And exactas, you have several advantages, not the least of which is you can look into the probables of the pool with the will pay, not the will pay screen, the probable pay screen, and have an opportunity to weight your bets effectively, as we've talked about before. So if you're going to be going to that third slot and betting blind and having a lot more randomness come into the mix, a lot of times I want there to be a very specific reason why I'm doing so. Here's another question.
Yeah.
You want to chime in on that?
Yeah, one other thing is and Duke Matisse taught me this just sitting with him at tournaments, various tournaments where I'd be playing tries and stuff. And he asked me one time, like, do you really want the try if this 4 to 5 shot runs third?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want that at all. Because I don't care if it's 20-1, 20-1, right? Like, it's not going to pay what it should pay. If you can have the ticket where it's 20-1, 20-1, then just play the dang exacta.
Right.
Like,
sometimes
no
having
point.
that. Sometimes having the chalk out is worth something. Now, granted, in recent years, I feel like, and this is a whole other topic we won't do at length here today, the computer teams and the people who are betting late have gotten much better about properly weighting their bets in the try. I feel like in the old days, that situation of getting the favorite out really paid a lot better than it does today in many instances, but I still think that principle is very, very true. It's all about picking the pool where you can most accurately reflect your opinion. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just it took me a while to learn this, and I think that if you can have $100 exacta, it's sometimes better than having a $4 try.
Oh, usually
if you can. Yeah, it just maybe that was a bad math example, but it's better than having a $10 try. It's because the $10 try could have 4 to 5 and third, and you're just not really getting anything for that.
Yeah, especially when you're talking about betting slightly higher amounts and being able to move them around and weight them efficiently, there's no reason why. If you can hit it, it's just very logical, but I don't think people think this way. You can do better in the double than you can in the pick 4. If you can bet it more in accordance with your opinion and hit it a lot more times. And I think a lot of people are just attracted to the more difficult wager, thinking that the level of difficulty going up automatically means the payout's going to be higher. Not necessarily so. So just something else to think about when it comes to your betting strategy. Here's a question. I think we can quickly dismiss this one, but it was asked and it deserves an answer. Any connection, Jonathan, between how Paradise Woods fared in the Oaks, i.e. not well, and should more have been read into the form of the Santa Anita Derby as a result of that, and those California horses downgraded? It's a little confusing, but I think I know what the question is asking. But we'll let you take it first.
Well, I think I know what the question is asking. I think the answer is no. Are they saying that
somehow Paradise Woods, I'm reading it as Paradise Woods not running well maybe indicated that, Gormley wasn't going to run that well, which I don't think you can. I mean, I think you're in apples and orange territory to the extreme.
Battle of Midway, I guess I don't really understand. I mean, I guess I kind of understand the question, but I really don't understand the premise, because Battle of Midway hit the board.
Yeah, he ran great.
Right. I don't think Gormley was. I never. In that race, the figure was so low. The only horse that I could have even almost made a case for was the one who went way too fast in the pace, which was Battle of Midway. I was never going to make a case for Gormley, who sat a trip in behind a 3-horse duel, and I think Battle of Midway ran well. I mean, Paradise Woods to me was circumstantial. What she did that day was real. There's no getting around that. And in the Oaks, in the Santa Anita Oak, what she did that day was real. She ran fast. She ran fast and she finished well. She got an unbelievable final time that fit on a day where there was no tricky track situations. Abel Tasman, who she buried in that race, came back and won the Kentucky Oaks. So what Paradise Woods did on that dry track at Santa Anita and the Santa Anita Oaks was real. Now, the question is what happened on Oaks Day, on Kentucky Oaks Day, and there's a lot of different excuses. She didn't like the surface. She shipped. She was in a suicide duel with Miss
Good
Sky
horse.
Warrior. There's a lot of reasons why she didn't run well, and none of them to me are that she's not very good or that what she did in the Santa Anita Oaks wasn't real.
I've seen times in my life where I've noticed the form from one region. We've seen this at the Breeders' Cup. I feel like there's been a couple Breeders' Cups where none of the I wish I could think of specific examples. I can't on the fly. But where none of the New York horses showed up or something. I mean, I feel like we have seen that dynamic play out at times where it might be more than randomness. But I would say in general, you don't want to be looking at different races on a day and seeing one race over or underperforming in your mind and having that affect what you're going to do with horses coming out of another race on that day. I'm not saying it's never relevant, but it seems like a very tricky game to play. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. No, I think anything you cover with one blanket is a problem.
That's generally good advice in horse racing. We got a couple of questions about takeout, actually. One was, does the takeout of a bet ever point you to one pool versus another?
No,
I would say yes, definitely for me. So we can argue about this one.
Well, the only time that I really pay attention is the pick 5. I think the pick 5 is a great bet because it's got low takeout. And,
one of the examples I was going to use was the pick 5 of what.
Do I look like, ooh, should I play the exacta because it's got 18%, or should I play the pick 3 because it's got 23? I don't do that.
Well, there are also two. I mean, that probably are there. And it's funny that I don't even know this. It's not a good sign. I'm not even going to go down the road really. But if there were bets, a pick 3 and an exacta is apples and oranges in a way that exacta and trifecta are not. I do think it's smart to pay attention to this stuff, especially when it comes to a bet, like the Rainbow Six that we've talked about, which to me is really a bet. Unless you have some majorly pressing handicapping reason. I'm not too interested in that bet with its high effective takeout on any day except the mandatory payout day. Is that a bet? We haven't talked about this in a while. Is that a bet you'll chase for fun when you're down there? Are you inclined towards playing it? Are you inclined towards avoiding it?
No, I'm a mandatory day, or I'll play it if I have 3 singles. You know what I mean?
That's exactly.
I'm trying to be cheeky, but no, it's a mandatory payout bet for me. But it's not so much the takeout in that situation. It's just the structure of the silliness of the having to have one and that deal.
You're just not
half the pool coming back and all that stuff.
The other question about takeout we had was somebody on Twitter was talking about payouts, hearing people complain about payouts coming back less than they should. There was an interesting one on Oaks and Derby, actually. Did you notice the payoff of the Oaks Woodford Derby pick 3?
Yeah, so
Half
here's
the
the
parlay.
thing.
Half the parlay. And we should explain what we
Because-
mean by half the parlay. And then,
Well, we should have talked about this. Let's double check this because Nick Tamro actually tweeted about it, and then someone pointed out to him that the payout he was mentioning was for 50 cents.
that would
So I don't
explain
know.
it completely.
Yeah, I think that it was like 175 for 50 cents,
Gotcha.
something like that. I don't have it in front of me, but
All right, so maybe that one's a bad example, but
if we talk slow enough and use random
I'll talk
words,
about the concept. The concept of the parlay is when you're betting a double, you want it to pay more than the win price for betting each winner individually, betting the first horse at 2-1 and then taking that $6 and betting it on the horse in the second leg, etc. When you're playing a parlay, because you're paying takeout once, and because there's a degree of difficulty that's greater, having the two outcomes rather than one, you need there to be juice in that. Payoff. So we got to do the math here and figure out if this is a real thing or if it's just one was. Other people who I've heard talking about this are smart enough that I would be surprised if the answer was as simple as it was a 50-cent payoff versus $1, but it could be. Everybody's got their Derby hangover, and even smart people are able to make mistakes. So
all right.
we
So
should
the
delve into this.
$2.
You and me doing math on air is like potential for complete and utter disaster, by the way.
It says $175 for $2. I don't know if that's right or not.
Well, if that's right, speaks to this point. But let's get back to the exact question. We'll follow up on this after we have time to do a little bit more homework. What does it mean when a bet pays less than it should, and why does it happen?
When it pays less than the parlay?
Less than it quote unquote should, which I'm interpreting to mean the parlay.
Can I use a lifeline?
Who do you want to call?
Either Eric Bilick or Nick Tamro.
Well, if either Eric might. No, Eric usually listens via pod, and I don't know that Nick bothers with us when he's not on. So
no, I think that I guess the answer, the non-mathematical, answer would be, I guess, is that in one pool or the other, whether it's somewhere in one of the wins or in one of the legs of the pick threes, just something's getting hammered by someone who is essentially who's throwing off the payoff.
Yeah, I mean, why they're efficient, why they pay, why they're not an overlay, I think is an easier one to answer, and that gets back to the computer bettors who we talk about periodically on this show. Their job, their business model is to bet efficiently, and so that's going to maybe keep there from being a little bit of extra juice. But they are also good enough that you wouldn't think they'd bet something to the point where it paid half of what it should. Of course, if you're dealing with multiple computer groups, which there are, all trying to beat each other by betting at the last second, there is a world in which they essentially, the equivalent in poker, the equivalent would be overbetting the pot, and you end up with a payoff that's less than it should be. It could also be, on a day like Derby Day, somebody making a crazy bet that just happens to hit, right? I mean, someone making a $5,000 straight whatever could be enough, even in some of these Derby Day pools, to take some juice out of a bet like the pick three. Let's table this discussion. You reach out to your lifelines in the meantime, and let's give a more cogent answer to why does it happen on our Friday show. You good with that?
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on and talk about a little bit of racing. I mentioned there are 4 stakes at Belmont on Saturday. The first one comes in race 4, and it's the Peter Pan. Let's look at this from a macro level first. Anybody in here who you're already thinking, he might be an interesting pick for the Belmont Stakes? We've seen horses prep in the Peter Pan and come back in the Belmont and do really well. Most recently, I guess Tonalist took that path a couple of years ago. Any Belmont horses for you in here?
Oh, I tell you what, I think that an example of Steph Curry and LeBron, or Kevin Durant and LeBron, I think they all like each other, but I think there's a friendly rivalry there. And I think that LeBron would if he can knock off Steph from winning a title, that's going to be a little bit sweeter for him. And I would imagine that Chad would like nothing more than to keep Todd from winning a triple crown. So I would think that Timeline and Take Your Guns are both going to be pointed towards the Belmont, regardless of what happens in this situation if they both run well. So I think those two horses definitely could be considered. An interesting point that I won't even take credit for. I heard Dave Grinick saying it on Vic this morning when I was driving on the highway is, what if Master Plan wins this race? I mean, they're gonna wheel him back against Always Dreaming, trying for a Triple Crown race. So interesting storylines for sure. Obviously, the winner of this race, unless it's Todd, would obviously be participating in the Belmont.
Master Plan, certainly interesting. He was an AE in the Derby and scratched there. Made a nice run. Maybe was flattered by pace last time out in the UAE Derby. My issue with him here is I'm just not sure how things are going to trip out for him, breaking from the one pole against some pretty impressive-looking horses and the likes of, Timeline specifically. It's a boring pick, but I certainly wouldn't want to get knocked out of whatever I was betting by Timeline. If you forced me to make a selection based on what I've done in the race so far, I'd probably land there. What about you? Do you see a path to victory for Master Plan, and who's your selection in the race?
No, I don't see a path for victory for Master Plan. I mean, but I also didn't see one for the winner of this race last year, which was another Todd horse that I'm going to go blank on his name. I can't think about it now, but anyways, for me, we talked about this earlier, and it's funny how it comes back up here. If you look at Timeline and you look at time form, he ran a huge number. I mean, he ran a 127. I mean, that's like arrogant-ish type of numbers. And when you see that situation and you see that it took place in the slop, then I'm going to take it with a grain of salt, especially when the race before that was a 94. That's a huge jump up. Now, he might run off the screen and prove me wrong, but at 7-5 as the favorite, I'm going to look elsewhere. And I'm going to take a shot with Meantime, the Brian Lynch horse that won at Keeneland. I thought that horse ran really impressively, was working tremendously into that spot. And Brian Lynch has kind of caught my attention the last couple of years on his ability to get a horse ready to rock and roll. Jose Ortiz is one of those riders who, when I see his name on a horse that I'm interested in, it makes me feel comfortable because I know that the horse is going to be ridden with at least a certain degree of aggressiveness. I know the horse is at least going to be put into a forward position if that's what needs to be done. He's a great finisher. And so for me, I'm going to probably build some stuff around Meantime. I think another horse that could be interesting to kind of build some stuff around is Take Your Guns with Chad. That horse just kind of kept kind of going and won at 1 1/8 at Keeneland, and is one that I think could get a piece of it. Timeline, if he runs back to that number, this race, they don't even have to run it. It's over. But I'm going to try to get a little creative here with Meantime and a little bit of Take Your Guns.
Yeah, I liked how he finished up Timeline in that race. But obviously, you don't go poor betting against one-number slop horses. So I'll take your point with that. I haven't looked it up yet, but Made from Lucky, is that who you're thinking of? Who are you thinking of?
That was it. Made from Lucky.
There you go. That might have been a couple of years ago. But
maybe it was 2. Yeah, maybe it was 2. I don't know who won last year.
Trying to remember. You dig for that while I do the preamble for race 6 at Belmont on Saturday, which is the Grade 3 Bogey. We see the return to the races of Miss Temple City, who scratched over Derby weekend. This is an interesting race, though. I've got a couple of my filly and mare crushes in here between Time and Motion and Miss Temple City. But I was thinking, and this could just be absolutely nuts, but I was a little bit interested in taking a look at Hawksmoor coming back to the races for Arnaud Delacour in here. The 2 races in the U.S., the first one, the QE2, was actually a pretty darn good race. Went down ahead to Time and Motion, showing that their form on their day pretty similar. And then between the long campaign and the way the turf was playing on the day of the Mrs. Revere at Churchill, I just thought that was a put a line through it type of race. Looks to be training well. I like the fact that she was down with Delacour in Tampa, but has gotten back to Fair Hill. Seen that place revive many a horse. If she was feeling homesick at all, Fairhill of any of the places to train in the USA would be the most reminiscent of an English or Irish training ground. I just thought at what could be a big price, Hawksmoor's worth leaving in your mix, at least vertically speaking. Who did you come up with in the bogey?
Yeah, I mean, it's supposed to rain quite a bit, isn't it?
I don't know, to be honest. It's not raining now. That doesn't mean all that much.
I believe the weather is supposed to come, from what I know, and I'm not even in town, so it's not my fault. But when it comes to those situations, I always want to look through, and Timeform's really good for it too. It's very easy for the eye to kind of scroll through their lifetime PPs and see how they've run on anything other than firm. And one of the horses that kind of stuck out to me, well, there's two things that stuck out. One is Decida is in here, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost positive there's a point in which Decida was scratched because of trying to avoid soft turf.
That's correct, though then she did run okay on it late in the year, if I remember right.
Absolutely, she did. She ran well in the Canadian, where my pick beat her, which is Reina de Batir, whatever. The horse that might,
that's terrible. If you're going to be on podcasts and things and doing videos, you've got to at least know. Yeah, even if you're going to butcher it, just butcher it with confidence. Don't stop in the middle and throw a whatever in there. Reina de Bateria. How about that?
I was going to say, where's Mike Hogan when you need him? That was one of he got DQ'd off of that filly, didn't he, at Saratoga?
Yeah, that was a brutal beat for him, as I recall. You're absolutely right about this weather here. It is going to get super soft. So if you're still concerned about that for Decida, that's maybe a reason to oppose her at a short price in here.
But I wouldn't toss, right? Because I think that she might actually drift. I think that was a pretty publicized story, and she ran okay last time on it. But am I really giving you anything by telling you to use the two Chads in a turf race in New York? Well, here's what I will say: is Miss Temple City, I'm assuming, did not run at Churchill because of the ground, and now she's going to show up here, and I'm thinking that she's probably not really excited about the ground here as well, but it feels like they can't skip another spot. So
yeah, because it's more of a prep. You got to figure it's more of a prep for Ascot, right?
Right, and so they got to get one in her, so they're going to have to run her. And so I think at another short price, I'll be willing to fade her as well. And so Time Motion, she tricks me sometimes. So she doesn't really have any form on soft ground. She yielding at Keeneland. In the juvenile Phillies turf, she ran well, but she's kind of avoided it since then.
Yeah, she's an interesting question. Certainly, you're just looking at the breeding, you wouldn't think a bog would be her friend. Just another reason to like Hawksmoor, honestly. When I was talking about the ground for Churchill that day, I didn't mean that Hawksmoor doesn't like soft. I more meant the way that specific course was playing versus where she was, and just didn't look like she was getting over it that day. And again, like these Euro horses especially, they could be pretty well out of gas even by Breeders' Cup time, let alone by November. I think they were just seeing where she was then. I think that race is just a total line out. She's pretty interesting to me in this spot, and I think you save. I mean, at this point in New York turf races in my picks, it's pretty much I bet who I like, and then I throw in Chad anyway. So I don't see a reason to get off that plan here. Let's move on to the 8th, the Man of War. Another opportunity to watch some top-level turf racing. Another horse better known for form in the UK and Ireland than on our shores in number 4, Zhukova, who, you always do wonder when they come over here, if they come over here expecting firm ground and wanting firm ground for their horse. If that's the case, that might be a little tricky. A little bit more research needed on Zhukova for me, but certainly one who I think has to be left in the mix to some degree. I wanted to pick Highland Sky at a big price. This is a horse who we've talked about many times in the show, and I believe is a little bit better than the overall running lines suggest. I think this is a talented runner. Again, ground a little bit of an open question on breeding. You wouldn't be the first one you'd say wants to run in a bog. So I don't know where that leaves me. I wanted to come here picking the 4 and the 5, but at this point I don't really know. What about you? Who's going to get over this ground and get the victory at Belmont on Saturday?
Well, I think to your point is that it's with these Euros that come over, there's two questions: was it Lasix or was it ground? and it's really hard to tell which one it was. It could be both. Here's what I'll say is, this is probably one of the first, Euro shippers that we've dealt with, I want to think, since we've done the time form merge with DRF, and so we haven't really kind of pointed this out, but one of the greatest parts about it is you can see their time form figures, which are the same scale as ours, their lifetime time form figures. And when I looked down, I saw Zukova had ran a 132 and 1/7 in a grade 3 going 1.25 miles on soft ground in Ireland. And then I looked down one more race and Zukova beat Found. Maybe she does want firm ground. But I joked with a European guy in the paddock during Derby about the ground. He said we would call this firm. And after it had been raining for 3 days, and so
there's no way that was firm. I've seen him to plenty of. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this man had walked the turf course and knows something I don't, but that seems like hyperbole.
I think he was just kind of joking, but I think to the point is that, if it's not raining today, if it rains tomorrow, it's not going to be a disaster. I would think that this horse could act on that surface. Picks up Johnny V, who's obviously riding really well at the moment. And then Wake Forest, I'm sure that if I picked him, he would hang. If I don't pick him, he'll beat us. So, be aware of that. I needed Patterson Cross last time for a life-changing score, and Wake Forest, of course, beats me when I don't need him. So,
what were you alive to there? Was that a pick 6 situation?
No, I think it was
tournaments.
I think it was a pick 5, and then a ton of tournaments, like another Del Mar seed, a BCBC, blah, 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 a bunch of stuff. I'd use Patterson Cross, and he was a big price, so maybe not life-changing, maybe year-changing.
Year-changing, month-changing, day-changing, whatever you need. It's always so hard to get that last leg home, and typically an old friend who you've bet on before who comes back and beats you. So a little more bit of research required there, but I think we're both attracted to Zukova. That will be my official pick. I'll claim it if the horse wins, even though I do have a couple of extra little questions. But that's a great point. I mean, when you've got group form by 7, and you've got a name like the Scalp of Found in your PPs, you're probably going to look pretty good against a bunch of USA turf horses. Let's go on to the 10th. It's the Ruffian. This one I haven't even really had a chance to look at yet, Jonathan. How does it shake out?
Well, I mean, I think if the track does come up with any moisture in it, and you look down through the PPs and you see the figure that Bar of Gold got in the slot on this track, it's going to be hard to look anywhere else. It feels like this could end up being like a four horse race. I mean, the 5 Bar of Gold and the 3 Highway Star have the same ownership, so there's a chance that they might just leave the off going to the outside mare and Bar of Gold, and it just does. I just don't feel like any of these other horses are good enough to beat her if she runs back to even a little bit of that number that she ran on October 26th. So it's nothing really that creative. It's kind of a small field anyway. So I guess the only other horse that I could see winning would be Kieran's horse and Indulgent. But for me, in playing all types of multi situations, I'll single Bar of Gold if there's a little bit of moisture in the track and hope to get out of this spot alive.
How do you see it from a race design point of view for Bar of Gold?
Well, it's funny. It's not terribly fast, especially if you look on time form. It says that it's got the little blue marker that suggests that horses that are on or near the lead have a chance to succeed or to do well in this spot. But for me, when it's off, I feel like paces kind of pick up a little bit. It's usually not off, and it's just like slow because most horses want to try to go on with it, get a little bit out of the kickback, and so I think they tend to speed up a little bit when the track's off. So Bar of Gold, who the pace projector has sitting last early, I think will be a little bit closer in that situation. If you look at her race in the slot, 3 back, she wasn't nearly as far back as she was then. So I would project that High Ridge Road from the rail will probably send out of there stretching out from 7 with Jose Ortiz, but I don't think it'll be blistering. but I also don't think it'll be slow like time form projects it will be.
It is one of those times where when you vet the time form projection and you bring in other knowledge, especially knowledge of riders, I agree. It seems like Jose has to go. And then Paco has speed in the 2-post. And as we saw in the ride he gave in the Kentucky Oaks, and if you've ever paid any attention to how he rides, I mean, he is a dead sender. Bailey joked on the NBC telecast he'd rather be on the lead than be president. I mean, it's just what he does. So when you think of having two inside horses, both maybe going faster than what the pace projector is an algorithm. It's looking at pace figures and trying to put horses on the races. So it's right for what it's seeing. But then when you factor the human element in, maybe this can hot up, and maybe you can get away with pressing up Bar of Gold even more, even though everybody else is going to see that big figure too, but maybe there's a way to get a little bit of equity in your late pick 4 or whatever multis you want to play late at Belmont on Saturday. Is that sort of the direction you're leaning right now?
Yeah, I had to mute it. I was laughing so hard. That's one of my favorite pace sarcasms that I'll be using from now on is, he'd rather be on the lead than be president. It almost passed my favorite one, which I'll just give hints about. And if you really want to know, you can DM me. But it's what our friend Jack Jenkins, who said that a horse was so far back he was compared it to some anatomy on a cat. Was probably my favorite of all pace. Sarcasms, but the Paco one's pretty good.
Everything is better in Jack's country drawl. That's for darn sure. Let's talk quickly about Santa Anita. We just have a couple minutes, but maybe that's enough. Did you get a chance to take a look at the stakes out there?
Yeah, I did. I got an interesting opinion and a pretty straightforward one that I'm sure people, if they knew that my FedEx delivery from Louisville came back safe, will know where I'm going in one spot.
Well, you pick. You pick which one you want to give first.
We'll start down the hill, the Desert Code. I don't really know the answer to this question, but I think it's an interesting question to ask. It's just the interesting dynamic is with Sistron for John Sadler, who went to won the stake at Oaklawn, going 2 turns on the dirt, and now they're cutting back down the hill. Drawn outside, makes a ton of sense. Showing speed, going long on the turf, finished up well, should be pretty good. And that's a really good angle. I mean, it's not really the kind of dead sin cutback situation that we've talked about, but interesting. But I'm going to go with the 2 Peter Millers. I thought Arms Runner was interesting. Ran greenly first time down the hill, ran well. Gets his kind of go-to rider in Roberto Arroyo. And then Big League, first time turf. One of the things I wanted to point out is if you can go to your time form and you look under breeding, you'll see a number, a rating. And if you click on that number, it will show you this horse, the sire, the dam, the siblings. I usually like to click on the siblings, and it shows the figures on 3 different surfaces for all the siblings. And the fastest figure run by a sibling was run on the turf. And that's a good indicator to me that this horse should act a little bit on the turf. Peter Miller's good down the hill. Edwin Maldonado gets a horse out of the gate. So Big League and Arms Runner are going to be the 2 horses I'm going to try to build something around. I guess I'll probably play Sistron defensively, but also be looking to try to beat the horse at what looks like a short price and kind of a confusing last few races. Kind of I'm just not really sure about the campaign, so I'm trying to figure that part out.
Jonathan Kinchin, many things to many people, among them a walking Timeform US webinar. Thank you for that. That's a very cool little tidbit you threw out there, and you're reminding me I need to press you into service soon to help me out with one of those shows. Really psyched. Next Wednesday I've got a cool one for the Preakness. Andy Beyer and Andy Serling going to be joining me. Look for the marquee on DRF.com to sign up for that. Let's really quickly talk about the Barrera. We're going to start with a question. Aristocratic back in here with yet another new trainer. What's going on here, JK?
Look, a lot of times in my life I've had to look in the mirror and say, Jonathan, are you right, or are you wrong, or do you know what you're doing, or and when you fired 1, 2, 3, 4 of the last 6, 7 Kentucky Derby winning trainers, be time to take a look in the mirror, and it might be you that's the problem. So,
Jonathan, referring, of course, to Kaleem Shah, the owner of Aristocratic, who famously replaced Baffert at the beginning of the year and now replacing O'Neill with Simon Callahan here for Aristocratic for this start in the Barrera. American Anthem returning to the races in here too. Where's your money going in the Barrera?
Well, let me grab my wig. Hold on one second. Let me find it here. No, I'm gonna. The horse ran way too good on January 7th for his last two performances to be real. It's just way too good, and I'm going to give him another shot cutting back. You know, a lot of times we chase these horses trying to stretch them out for the Kentucky Derby, and it turns out that they actually want to do something different. Bob Baffert has excelled at this many a times with horses like Cheetah and just horses that they were trying to stretch out, and he cuts them back, and he starts winning stakes races and one-turn spots. And I'm hopeful that that's what's going to happen with American Anthem. He'll be forward. He'll be finishing. I want to take a look at the workout reports, obviously, to see how he's going. But I think there'll be some value there against Aristocratic, who's obviously, had to move from barn and move from barn to barn. And it can be confusing, I think, on these horses and just on how, I would imagine trainers tack horses differently and feed differently and walk differently. And it just could be a confusing thing. And at a short price, I think I'll look for the Hall of Fame trainer down on the inside to get this horse back in action.
And, of course, Battle of Midway flattered that form a little bit. One of the horses he was dueling with on the lead in that Santa Anita Derby we talked about before was American Anthem. So that one makes a lot of sense to me. All right, we have come to the end of this week's DRF Players Podcast. I want to thank Jonathan Kinchin, as always, for his time. Most of all, I want to thank all of you for listening. We will be back on Tuesday with more Preakness chatter and a look back at all these stakes we've been talking about this weekend and more. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.